Electric cars can be a bit generic. In fact, all modern cars can be a bit generic. Old cars are a lot more character, but they're also a real pain to own. They break down a lot, they're not very fast, they miss all the mod cons. That's why there's a lot of interest in electric classic car conversions. They can give you that sense of character, that period feel, but in a car that is modern in driving style and performance and has all the extra features. One of the best around is this one I'm sitting in right now by Everrati. It has modern features and performance. Lots of performance. Before we start talking about this car though, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yep, this is a Porsche 911, a 964 to be exact. The 964 is a 911 model Porsche made between 1989 and 1993. It still has that classic bug-eyed look of the original before the lines are smoothed out with a 993, but the wheels are already expanding outwards and taking their arches with them. It's an iconic car, and Everrati has ensured that the classic looks are maintained, including the ducktail spoiler that was a unique option for this and previous generations of 911. You can get two main versions of the Everrati 964, there's also a Gulf Signature Edition, which is what we have here, that comes with an even more iconic Gulf oil paint job that Everrati has full permission to use. The Pure is a narrow body, and the Signature is a wide body. The Gulf version is the Signature model too. You get 17-inch Fuchs wheels for the Pure and 18-inch Cup 1 splits for the Signature. So far, so classic. But of course, that legendary flat 6 boxer engine has been removed and replaced with batteries and an electric motor. A travesty, I hear you say. Well, maybe, but hear me out. The original car had 247 brake horsepower and 310 Newton meters of torque. The Everrati versions have more, much more. The Pure has 440 bhp with 460 Newton meters of torque, while the Signature with Performance Pack has 500 bhp and 500 Newton meters of torque. That's twice as much power as the original car. We'll get to how fast that makes this car go in a bit. Before that, let's go through just a few more of the details. The Everrati 911 does use a Dona 964, but completely restored. There were over 60,000 of these made, so Everrati isn't using a particularly rare vehicle. Don't worry too much about the loss of a lovely boxer engine either. You get to keep the original powertrain, which can either be stored for you or made available for display. Let's have a look around what Everrati has done to this car's interior. You can either have leather, Alcantara or cloth seats. All cars have mod cons like parking sensors and rear parking camera, air conditioning, and if you want a sat nav you can use the Apple CarPlay, because there's a Porsche sourced navigation system with DAB radio and support for Apple CarPlay and Bluetooth connectivity as well, and that's how you actually get the sat nav in this car. There are a bunch of dials that are not original Porsche but inspired by typical period designs. So on the right you have a clock, and then in the you have the miles per hour, an analog miles per hour, and then you have the power and regen gauge, which is massive in the middle. Then you have a battery state gauge on next to that, and finally there's a voltage meter on the left. So these seats are quite comfortable. They're the classic Porsche sports comfort seats with really nice high bolsters. They hold you in. I used to own another Porsche that had exactly the same seats, and they're brilliant for really long distance driving. So I really commend these particular seats. Obviously 911s are famous for having the engine right the way back, and that gives space for a couple of rear seats. They're not really very good for anything more than children or small adults, but at least they're there. A lot of sports cars like this don't have any rear seats at all. One thing you don't get a lot of, and never have done with this generation of 911, is a lot of storage space. Open the boot, and of course there's no actual boot space there because that's where the engine was, and there's still a motor in there. The only storage space is in the front. That's a little bit less than a C4, enough maybe for an overnight bag, and that's about it. All other luggage would have to be kept in the body of the car. One area where the original car does beat the Everrati version is range. This car has a 53 kilowatt-hour battery, which is about the same as a current generation Renault Zoe. You could go around 345 miles with a petrol 964. Whereas the Everrati does around 180 miles. There's AC charging up to 11 kilowatts, so if you have three-phase power you can use that, and DC charging up to 80 kilowatts. That means that it takes about 40 minutes to get to 80% on a sufficiently powerful DC supply, which isn't too bad. With those kinds of ranges, you're probably not going to do more than about 100 miles without stopping. So this car, it can venture beyond the local area, but it's probably not an absolute long-haul GT car unlike the original, which was quite capable of going across Germany if you wanted to.
So driving is what this car is really all about. You can probably hear from it's pretty noisy in here. Porsches of this era were not famous for their noise cancellation and muffling, but that's again as part of the character. Also, the electric motor is pretty noisy. There is a noise generator that I'll demonstrate in a bit later. This car is a lot faster than the original. The original car took 5.5 seconds to hit 60 miles per hour. Now, the pure version of this takes an incredible 4.5 seconds. The Signature Edition with its performance pack takes under 4 seconds. So that's what we've got here. So you can feel a real sense of that classic 911 pull when you put your foot on the accelerator. It's absolutely incredible. Really, really nice. 911s of this generation were pretty famous for also for being a bit of a widow maker, with that engine behind the rear wheels. Bit of a bonkers thing to do. Porsche tried to make it work, and eventually by the generation after this they did make it work, but not with this one. Now the nice thing about this car is, although Everrati has tried to keep the general dynamics very similar with a similar weight distribution, not so much of the weight is actually behind those rear wheels. So dynamically it's a little less likely to bite you in the arse. We're driving in quite wet conditions here, and it could be quite dangerous. But luckily, you know, I've certainly found that it holds the road pretty well. You really get a feel of the road. You can probably see from the camera bouncing up and down that you feel all the bumps, which is probably what you want from a car like this. Everrati has provided some enhancements. For example, they put a quaife differential to help with that traction, which is again particularly welcome in conditions like this where it's a little bit greasy. Now 911s are really famous for their acceleration, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that, you know, having all that motor weight on the rear wheels means there's a lot of traction out of the line. But that also means that the front can be a bit light. But with this car, there's a bit more weight on the front, and you certainly feel it because you don't get that kind of sense of danger if you go a little bit too hot into a corner. That's the kind of thing that would have ended up with you in the facing the wrong way in a hedge or worse. So one thing that Everrati hasn't really added very much of, this car already had ABS, but that's about the only safety feature this car has. There's not even airbags. It wasn't something that was standard in this era. There was kind of an option towards the end of the 964 era, but none of the Everrati cars will even have that. You know, you do get a decent seat belt, but you know, you don't get anything like lane detection or blind spot detection, any of that stuff. So this car maybe isn't quite as fast as a Tesla Model 3 Performance or definitely not a Tesla Plaid Model S, but it is really, really quick. Because of the way this car delivers that speed, it hunkers down and takes off, and the way you feel the road through the steering wheel, you have a much more engaging driving experience than even with a much faster electric car, maybe the Taycan or a Model 3 or Plaid Tesla Model S. This car is such a sense of occasion to drive, but of course there is a drawback, and you probably guess what it is. Yes, it's the price. The basic pure car is £200,000, and if you want to step up to that Signature Edition, it's £250,000, and that's from those prices. It really depends on how you custom spec the car when you get Everrati to make it for you. This Golf Signature version doesn't actually have a price attached to it. It's priced on application, which kind of tells you how expensive it's likely to be. But just look at it. What an amazing looking car. Everybody's going to be turning their heads to look at it as you drive along. One thing you do have to get to know is that the brakes are a little bit more progressive than maybe you might be used to with a modern car. They're good, they can stop the car pretty fast, but you do have to put your foot on them. That little press that you give with some cars doesn't do very much with this one. There is regenerative braking though, so if you take your foot off the accelerator, the car does naturally slow down a bit. You can also get this noise production system. We didn't have it on for the rest of the car, the drive, because, well, frankly, you're probably having trouble hearing what I'm saying. But it gives you a real sense of occasion, and will definitely stop people from being run over by a very quiet electric car. Of course, it misses that kind of up and down of the traditional car with its gearbox, but just listen to that.
This This car is an absolute joy to drive. If you can get over the fact there's no real boxer 6 burbling behind you, despite that noise box maybe giving you a sense that there is, you'll really, really love this car. It has all the period sense. It has the kind of industrial feeling to the steering. It has, which, you know, is a really classic Porsche of this era kind of thing. It has great tactile feel as you're on the road. It gives you a lot of the great things about a classic car of this era, and none of the problems. It will start up. It's really, really fast. Obviously, the one drawback is just how expensive it is. So I'm going to go and see how much I can get for one of my kidneys, because I really, really want one. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel.